Cool to see The Last Dance.
Yeah, that
I
was
don't know if you ever watched that.
oh, 100%. I loved it. Absolutely.
Dude.
And that's a perfect precursor into getting into full fueled. So I want to begin this journey into our conversation by asking, I know we're all getting COVID fatigue, but 4 years ago or so, we were still trying to
Mhm.
figure out how it was going to affect us. How did you survive that pandemic era, and how did it ultimately affect the way that you do things now?
Yeah, all right. That's a really good point because we had to be nimble. Actually, I was investing in real estate at the time, and we had to be nimble in terms of like how we were approaching real estate, uh, and like where the business was going. Like, was it did we need a little bit more risk adverse in terms of like how we're operating in that state and in that season, like even with our marketing efforts. And so I had to actually make a pivot in that season as well, which was a good and a bad thing. But we're also again in kind of another pivot season with current economic trends of where they're going. So it's kind of one of those momentous like business seasons that we kind of consistently need to pivot and see like new levels of opportunity. So, but during COVID, I actually had a real estate investment company that I was working on, and we actually went more from an investment route to a wholesaling route. So we actually didn't hold on to a lot of things or a lot of investments at that time. And then just being adapt to the seasonality of like what you need to create as like the best source of like vertical within the business. And so that was the real estate side in terms of how we need to make that pivot instead of holding properties, but really identifying something that was a little bit more short-term hold so you didn't have long-term risk. And so in a business footprint, I would say right now is that season two, that seasonality, because what I'm seeing actually from a full fueled side of things is that many people are interested. And I was listening to something on Alex Armosi the other day. A lot of people are interested in kind of like the health and wellness side, but putting into practice is a completely different thing, right? And so like, yeah, I want to kind of put my toes in the water. I want to become more educated about it. A lot of my buddies will be sending me these videos of like, yeah, you should do content this way or this way. But then at the same time, they just want to put their toe in the water. They actually don't want to go in full force of like what that actually means to live that full field life. And so that's where I'm actually we're seeing like kind of the seasonality of how we need to talk to people on social and where these pivots need to occur. So I would say that COVID is almost like we're going into a second layer of COVID right now with current economic trends. Just where the economy is going, and pocketbooks are really tightening up too. So with Full Fueled specifically, and with our brick and mortar. So we have a brick and mortar here in Tampa. It's called Alessi Functional Health, where we focus on regenerative medicine, wealth, chiropractic, I say wellness, chiropractic, and nutrition. And so on the Full Fueled side, we focus on mindset, nutrition, and muscle, and building out a layer of community there and just driving more education to our audience. And then we invite guys into the community. But there is this layering of kind of where we're approaching the seasonality and current economic trends. I'm actually interested to see what kind of the next quarter, 6 months look like, because we live in a crazy world. We live in some crazy times right now.
We certainly do. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids
Yeah,
says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I follow my dream. I follow my dream. There was and I'll give a case in point. So, um, one thing I look back on, there was an elementary school teacher. I was watching a video on him, and he was teaching these young schoolboys how to chase their dreams. And so this one kid came up, raised his hand, and he said, I want to make it to the league. He wanted to play in the NFL. And so he's like, okay, he's like, let's break this down. And so he put 8 sheets of paper on the ground, and he said, jump from each step, each paper to your goal. And so he jumped on the first paper, jumped on the second one, jumped through all 8 and got to 8, right? And then he said, good. He's like, let me take a few of these sheets of paper away. And so he pulled a sheet full, like 3 or 4 of them away, right? He's like, okay, jump. And so he had to jump over, and it was a little bit longer jump. So it was a little bit more difficult, right? And so he jumped, and then he made another leap, and then he finally got to the last one. He's like, okay, let me take a few more away, right? And so then he took 3, 4 more away, and then he was only ended with the last one. He's like, you got to jump to the last one to give me a high five, but it was like 20 feet, right? And he's like, that's the point of setting incremental goals of what we do on a daily basis to achieve the dream, right? And one of the things that I just had actually sat down with my wife is like, we need to dream more, right? It isn't just about like just naturally doing the day to day. And that's what it really comes back to Full-Fueled. So what does that look like in the eyes of what I do on a day to day basis? So we coach a number of guys that are within our community, but it's building those building blocks of what dreaming looks like, right? What do you want your health to look like? What do you want your wealth to look like? What do you want your family to look like? And so what I always try to do is I'd reverse your 85-year-old self, right? What would your 85-year-old self thank you for doing today? And typically that's going to be incorporating some level of physical fitness, right? Getting yourself out of breath. And we call that HRV, right? Heart rate variability. How are we expanding ourselves with a level of discomfort? And then what are we putting into our body from a fuel standpoint that would allow us to be like to nurture our bodies and our minds to operate at its fullest capacity and allow us to dream, right? Having that bandwidth. And then the muscle piece falls in kind of with the movement element, but like how are we really expanding ourselves with some like a resistance level of training where we have this level of body composition that we have like a fortitude to really step into the day with a level of dominance, right? And so being the alpha, being a leader, but then shaping what that looks like, because I think we've got a skewed vision in today's world of what actually alpha means. We don't come in with like this totalitarian like dominance. We come in with like a piece of empathy, but then we also come in with a force that we're a force to be reckoned with, right? And so how are we coming with a layer of velocity? So on a day to day, I'm coaching some guys, and then I operate within my clinic. So right now we're heavily focused on the marketing side of things. It's one of the things that actually I said in the seasonality that we're in coming into the season of where politics are actually eating away at all the ads budget. It's becoming very difficult to get that exposure, right? That middle of the shelf ad budget.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly trying to, like, I'm in there checking out our ad creative. How can we implement new ads and new ad sets and new thumbnails so that we can deliver a higher performance in our ads? So marketing is always the main thing that I'm pretty much taking a look at in our business. And then at the end of the day, what I'll do is I'll go into kind of the training mode where I'll meet with our team at the clinic and really invest into them. Hey, what do we need help with? And they're just quick overview. It's not meetings. I'm actually one of the things that I'm doing is building a network, but then also coming back on the meetings. I feel like we should have less meetings in house. I try not to have very many meetings, and so what we do is we have one weekly meeting, and we run through a cool thing called an RBT. So we call them rosebud thorns, and so I want to make sure that I'm kind of hitting on with my team a cadence at which they can speak openly, personally or professional of a rose. And a rose is like what's going really well in their life, whether in the business or outside. A bud is what's on the horizon. What are they looking forward to? Again, it's that dreaming aspect. And then a thorn is something that like, hey, this hit me today, or this is something that's going on in my life. How can we work through it as a team together? So we go through our RBTs. We'll go roundtable on that. And then that's pretty much it on a weekly basis. So that's kind of like how I operate on a day to day.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
My third grade, 100%, I wanted to be a basketball player. I was like, hands down, I wanted to, like, that was my dream. I played basketball. And to give you a story on that, it wasn't until I really had to reluctantly give up on that dream in my mid 20s. We hold ourselves to a standard. I feel like we are little kids living the lives of adults sometimes, and I was that, right? So in my mid 20s, I was a really good basketball player. I'm a really good athlete, But I was very much, I had to come with to the terms that I was a very much of an underperformer. I had really a bad attitude, I would say too. It was more about me than about the team. And then my love of actually basketball grew, I would say in my mid 20s, because I kind of gave up the identity of like, I'm not an athlete. I can be more than that. Right. When I was in my mid 20s, I was like, my best days are behind me. But a lot of men, I think, actually think that way. As a lot of my best days are behind me. But in reality, is if you think of like, aren't we all trying to grow, like be a little bit more curious? Why aren't our best days ahead of us? Even in an athletic tense, like we can still perform at a very high level. And so I wanted to, in the third grade, absolutely, I just wanted to play ball for the rest of my life. Like I had this like vision. I would dream about playing in the NBA. And I think about that too, because there's guys that, have dreamed about playing in the NBA in the third grade. You see, like sometimes when they make it to the NBA, they'll be like, well, he wrote this down in the third grade. That was hands down something I wrote down in the third grade. I want to
Yeah.
play basketball in the NBA. Did it come true? No. But the reality is that I can still dream and my best days are still ahead of me. So
Yeah.
I didn't make it to the NBA. I didn't make it to this like echelon of like athletics of how I wanted things to go. But the reality is that I can now though take that same driving force and come into every day. And that's one thing I have to, I have to battle through sometimes too. Cause I do go back to that mindset of like, I could have been a lot better basketball player, 100%. I could have been a lot better athlete in general, baseball player. I could have been all those things. Um, and one of the things that I would, if I had to go back, which I don't regret anything because God has led me to this very moment for a purpose. But if I had to go back, I would 100% hands down start investing in the psychology of sport and what that could do for me, like what sport could do for me, not just within the four lines of a basketball court, but really what that could do for me in life. And so the psychology of really creating it as what we're building, even in Full-Fueled as a community. Um, I've realized, and this taken me, 30 plus years to get through, but I've realized that I never want to get to a mountain peak alone. Like there's never a time in my life where I want to get to a mountain peak alone.
Yeah.
And so I want to always be bringing somebody along that journey so that we could be like, hell yeah, we got to here together, man. And we had to go through some shit to do it. And so it's that's one of the things that I've learned as like a precursor of like I had to kind of reconcile with that third grade dream that didn't come to fruition. That's absolutely some, but man, there's the evolution of like, I can still play ball in the NBA. It might be a different NBA
Yes.
that is today than the actual NBA, but like at the end of the day, I can still play my ball in the NBA. Now, what does that look like and who am I bringing up with me? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. So
Yeah.
who's been that hero, that inspiration for you in your life?
Yeah, I've had quite a few. So people that just kind of have directed the course of where I'm at. I do have to give. I have faith-based background, so my dad has been a really like my dad's one of those guys that was never vocal, but man, did he lead well. He led well in terms of how he just acted with like ethics, integrity, all the time. So if I had to look back on something, I can envision my dad of just walking through various obstacles in life that he did it and he did it with a level of integrity. So my dad has been an instrumental piece in that. That's actually driven my love for the game of basketball too. He's been a coach for like 40 years. But loyalty has been another one of his attributes and characteristics that been married for coming up on 40 years. And then was a school teacher for 35 years and he's coached for over 40 years now. So that was just one mainstay that I've saw that act of like characteristics that was really, really good for me that I know not everyone has as a dad. So he's really helped me out and kind of envision that. My mom has been a little bit more vocal in my life, so I appreciate her. So my parents have been really kind of a fundamental piece in that. And then I will have to say, from an entrepreneurship perspective, my father-in-law has been a really good piece from an entrepreneurship of like looking at business, going through really crazy seasons of financial distress in 2008 to like really battling, just like getting through things and battling through really, really hard times, to then get on the other side and to run it like a true entrepreneur. So one thing he's always put presidents in place. He's built C-suite for his businesses, and then hired really, really solid employees to come up underneath some of the businesses that he's grown over a number of years. So he's been a really, really good visual in terms of entrepreneurism, that I've really taken away from that. And he shed some light on how I operate my businesses today and how I just want to nurture and run. And then the other cool thing that I always like giving advice to, because of the social world we live in and the social footprint we have, I would be wrong and amiss without like mentioning how I informed my brain to have a growth and abundant mindset, because I started listening to Tony Robbins, John Maxwell, Ed Milet, probably I would say close to 10 years ago. And I started reading a lot more and just a growth minded books as far as what they, that personal self-development or whatever you want to call it. But really, it's team development at the end of the day. What I want to, you don't grow without a team. But living in a social world, you can have these guys, like there's so much free information online where if you listen to them, you start kind of believing in some of the things that like they're saying, and using that and fostering that in your own mindset of like where your life wants to go. So I started listening to them many, many years ago, and I'd be amiss to not mention those names because they definitely helped me to grow and learn in that capacity.
So if you could meet one athlete alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
One athlete, if I had to sit down, an easy one that I would want to maybe meet, it would be Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate like Michael Jordan, but I, from an athletic perspective, in terms of, that's a great question, because I always liked the idea of somebody being able to like have a brand and like their business side, as well as like a brand, like being able like to also perform. So if I honestly would have to like meet somebody living today that's also playing, it's somebody we already talked about, and it would be Patrick Mahomes. And the reason why is because Patrick Mahomes has done a number of things for his brand, outside of football, and then he also does really good with it. Like he's like a good person, like he's doing good in the community, and he's grown this like he's probably worth, I would say, probably $400 or $500 million at this point, if not maybe a little more. But he's done good with it. So if I had to sit down with somebody, it would be I would like to sit down with Patrick Mahomes and kind of like feed his brain. He's awesome on the creative side, and then you could tell just like his spirit is people want to be around that.
For sure. So of everything that you've done and evolved into at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. I would say honestly, and I thought of this probably this past weekend. And I don't I don't know who's going to be listening in, and if it's somebody that actually listens to your show, but my wife went on a weekend trip with some women, and she had texted me, and she's just like, I just want to let you know how grateful I am. And I was like, man, that makes me feel good, but why? Right? And so my wife came home and we talked through a few things. And what I've seen is that in many of relationships is that what we are approaching and what this alpha male concept looks like is that a lot of guys remove themselves or a miss from the family environment. And one of the most things I am absolutely most proud of is that my foundation and my identity, number one, is in Christ. But then number two is I built a really deep and strong foundation within my relationship with my wife and my kids. And so that hands down is something that I would say is my most proud moment as being a husband and a father, because I built a really, really solid foundation. So even through odd economic times, growth in maybe some new businesses and going into new environments, that's one thing that remains steady. Where if I don't like comparing, but the reason why she was saying that is because the men haven't been like true alphas in their home, and work has been the greatest joy and pleasure. Where my foundation is not in work and play, but it's actually in the relationships and the protecting the peace of my house. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one professional sporting event, one game, where are you going?
One professional sporting game. I've been to like some pretty good ones. Um, I'm just trying to think. I probably would choose. I You got me on the spot, but I probably would choose Game Six, Bulls versus Jazz, where Jordan crossed up Russell Westbrook to hit that final shot.
Oh,
What we consider the Bulls' final shot on the Last Dance season. I
yeah.
think that'd be a pretty cool game.
That would be amazing. So, hey, man, if anyone wants to tune into your podcast, reach out, learn more, any of the good business in your world, where can they go?
Yeah, so Full-Fueled is on all of the syndication channels, so iTunes, Spotify. So if you want to check us out there, we host an episode weekly there. And then I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. So Matthew Tack on Facebook, Human.Optimizer. You can check us out there. We usually post a couple times a week.
Wonderful. Matthew, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your story. Keep spreading the light in the world, man.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. This is a sincere pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care.